My name is Sister Eliza Clare, and this is my recorded confession. If you're hearing it, it means I've finally kept the promise I avoided for most of my life. I stopped hiding. I'm recording this on a Tuesday in November 2023. The kind of Tuesday that looks ordinary from the outside. Gray sky, brittle wind, quiet hallways. The kind of day a person expects to forget. But I won't forget this one. Not even when my mind turns soft with age. At 7:12 a.m., the front bell rang. That bell doesn't ring often. Not for someone like me. I'm not famous. I'm not important. I'm just old. And in a convent, old can make you nearly invisible. I was in the small library, returning hymnals to the shelf, when Sister Marlene called down the hallway. "Eliza, someone's here asking for you." My first thought was, I must be in trouble. It sounds silly, but when you've spent decades living a life built around rules, spoken and unspoken, your body learns to panic before your brain knows why. I walked to the front entrance and saw a young woman standing there with a canvas tote bag clutched to her chest. She looked around 22, maybe 23. Hair pulled back, eyes that kept flicking to the floor like she was practicing courage, one breath at a time. "Are you Sister Eliza Clare?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped closer and held out an envelope. No return address, no stamp, no barcode. Just my name written in careful block letters, like somebody didn't trust cursive to survive the truth. "I'm supposed to hand this to you," she said. "Not mail it, not leave it. Hand it to you." My fingers felt numb as I took it. The paper was warm, like it had been held too tightly for too long. "Who is it from?" I asked. The young woman swallowed. "My grandmother." I waited for a name, but she didn't give it. She only added, "She passed last week. She left instructions. She said you'd understand." My throat tightened anyway, because I already did understand. Not the details, not yet, but the feeling. The feeling of a door you thought was sealed, clicking open. I stepped back inside, the envelope shaking slightly in my hands. I tried to smile, to keep my face calm, but the young woman watched me like she could see the whole story behind my eyes. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph and a folded note. The note said, "Sister Eliza, I held the truth for you because you were young and scared. The time doesn't bury things, it only covers them. It's time you tell your side before it's too late. M." That initial hit me like a slap. M. Then I looked down at the photograph and the air left my lungs. Two girls stood beside a hospital bed under harsh overhead lights. Early 1960s dresses, white shoes, thin smiles that didn't reach their eyes. One of them held a newborn baby. The other was me. Not Sister Eliza Clare. Not the wrinkled woman behind this recording. Me at 19. Fresh-faced. Tears streaking down my cheeks like I'd been crying for hours. I stared so hard my vision blurred. That baby wasn't just a baby. That baby was the reason I disappeared from my own life. That baby was the reason I never spoke my birth name again. That baby was the reason I ran into convent walls and called it devotion. People have always assumed I took vows because God called me. No. I took vows because grief cornered me and shame sealed the exits. Behind me, the young woman spoke softly. "My grandmother said you'd recognize it." I didn't answer. My mouth wouldn't work, because the only thought in my head was this: if M kept proof for 60 years, then the secret was never mine alone. And if it's being delivered now by a stranger with my blood in her face, then someone wants the truth to surface. Badly. I asked the young woman her name, and when she said it, my heart stuttered, because it was the same last name I once saw in a sealed adoption record and tried to erase from memory. Before I was Sister Eliza Clare, I was Nora Whitfield. Most people called me Nori, which I hated, but I never corrected anyone because that's who I was back then. Quiet, agreeable, afraid of making waves. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town where gossip traveled faster than wind. My parents were the kind of church people who never missed Mass, never missed a parish fundraiser, never missed a chance to be seen doing the right thing. In our house, reputation wasn't a side dish, it was the meal. In 1963, I was 19 and attending a Catholic college not far from home. I wasn't rebellious, I wasn't wild. I was the type who highlighted textbooks and wrote thank you notes. And then there was Jack Delaney. Jack wasn't flashy. He didn't have that smooth movie star charm. He was steady, like he'd been born with a sense of responsibility other boys had to learn the hard way. He wanted to be a teacher. He said it like it mattered, like it was a mission. Kids need one adult who doesn't give up on them, he used to tell me, serious as a priest. Just one. We'd known each other since we were kids, the kind of love that grows quietly until one day you realize it's everywhere. He'd walk me back to my dorm even in freezing wind. He'd remember my mom's birthday. He'd bring me peppermint candies because he knew I liked them when I was nervous. By spring, everyone assumed we'd marry. We assumed it too. It felt inevitable. Safe. Then the draft notice came. Vietnam didn't feel real in our town until it picked a name we recognized. Jack's letter arrived in April. He tried to act brave about it. I tried too. We both failed. The night before he left, he came to my parents' house for dinner. My mother made roast chicken like she was feeding him luck. My father shook Jack's hand like it could substitute for protection. Later, Jack and I walked behind the house where the porch light didn't reach. The air was sharp and clean. Stars looked like tiny holes punched into black paper. Jack pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple gold, worn smooth, his grandmother's. "I want you to have this," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Not because I'm trying to trap you, because I'm trying to hold on to something real." He slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting. "Wait for me, Nora," he said, and I hated that his voice cracked on my name. "Promise you won't let this end us." At 19, you think promises are armor. You think love is a shield. So I promised. I would have promised him anything. That night, scared, young, desperate, we crossed a line we weren't supposed to cross. The kind of line good girls didn't admit existed. But we weren't thinking about rules. We were thinking about the fact that tomorrow could steal him forever. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Not from Jack, from the government. Missing in action, presumed dead. I read it until the words turned into shapes. My mother cried hard. My father went silent, which was worse. And I didn't cry at first. I went numb. like my mind refused to accept what my eyes had seen. I wore black. I prayed like it could bring him back. I wrote letters anyway, because grief makes you do irrational things just to feel less helpless. Then, 3 months after that letter, a second truth arrived. Not in an envelope, in my body. I got sick every morning. My chest felt tender. I couldn't stay awake in class. I told myself it was grief, until one day I missed my cycle and missed it again. I stared at a calendar until the dates looked like accusations. And when I finally understood, my whole body went cold. I was pregnant. Jack was gone. My town was watching. My parents' pride was fragile. And inside me was the only piece of Jack I had left. I told myself I could hide it, just long enough to figure something out. But the more I hid, the more the secret grew, and the closer I got to a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Hiding a pregnancy in a small town is like trying to hide smoke in a room with no windows. Even if nobody sees it at first, everyone feels something's off. At first, I convinced myself I could manage it. Loose sweaters, big coats, avoiding hugs from my mother, who had that way of squeezing you like she could read your bones. I stopped eating breakfast in front of anyone because nausea made me gag. I started carrying peppermint candies in my pocket to mask it. I became a professional liar overnight. I'm just stressed, I'd say. School's exhausting, I'd say. Grief does weird stuff to your body, I'd say. And the worst part? Those excuses weren't even completely false. I was grieving. I was exhausted. I was unraveling. But the truth was underneath everything, growing day by day. By my 4th month, I couldn't pretend the changes were a little weight. My waist thickened. My chest ached. My face looked different, softer somehow. People started staring in that sideways way they do when they're trying not to stare. One woman at church asked my mother, loud enough for me to hear, "Is Nora eating enough? She looks round." My mother laughed awkwardly and said, "Poor girl's been grieving. It's normal." Normal. That word felt like a shield I didn't deserve. At night, I lay in bed listening to the house settle and creak. The silence felt loud, like it was pressing on my chest. I prayed until my lips felt numb. Please don't let anyone notice. Please don't let my parents find out. Please don't let me lose the baby. Then, one evening, I felt it. The first flutter. A small movement, like a fish turning in water. I froze on my bed, palm pressed to my stomach, holding my breath. It happened again, stronger. And suddenly, my secret wasn't just fear anymore. It was life. A real, living person. I whispered, "Hi." Then, because grief makes you strange, I added, "Your dad loved you." I started talking to the baby when I was alone. Quiet little confessions into my own skin. I told him about Jack's laugh, about how Jack always held the door, about how his hands shook when he put the ring on my finger. Sometimes I'd cry so hard I had to bite my knuckles to keep my mother from hearing. Because I couldn't tell anyone. Not my friends, who would look at me like I'd ruined myself. Not my priest, who would call it sin first, girl second. Not my parents, who would panic more about the parish than about me. The loneliness was a kind of punishment all by itself. By month 5, my mother started studying me at dinner like she couldn't decide what she was seeing. One night, she finally asked, quiet but sharp, "Nora, is there something you need to tell me?" My throat went dry. I could have confessed right there. I could have fallen into her arms and begged for help like a child. But all I could picture was my father's face, red with anger, the priest's disappointment, the town's whispers, my mother crying not because I was scared, but because I'd embarrassed her. So I lied. I told her grief had messed with my health. I said my doctor told me to rest. I said I didn't want to talk about it. My mother stared at me for a long moment, then nodded, like she wanted to believe me because believing was easier than truth. That's when I realized something chilling. I wasn't just hiding a pregnancy. I was building a second life made of lies. And I could feel the moment coming when I'd have to choose what happened to my baby. Because time doesn't pause for shame. It only pushes you closer to the edge. The night I left town, I carried one small suitcase and one giant lie. But the real horror wasn't the labor. It was the moment they told me, "Sign here," like my baby was paperwork. The charity hospital smelled like bleach and old sadness. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comforting. But it was anonymous. And in my world, anonymity felt like survival. At the front desk, I gave a fake name. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the pen. The nurse didn't look at my face for more than a second. She'd seen girls like me before. Quiet, pale, terrified, pretending they weren't terrified. I was in labor by morning. There's pain, and then there's pain that rearranges you. Contractions came like waves that didn't care if I was ready. I gripped the bed rail until my knuckles went white. I tried to remember prayers, but my mind kept slipping back to Jack. Jack should have been here. Jack should have held my hand. Jack should have seen his son. But Jack was dead, and the only person in the room who knew the truth was me. When my baby finally came, the room went quiet for a heartbeat. Then he cried, sharp and furious, like he was mad at the world for being so cold. And then the nurse placed him in my arms. Warm, real, heavy in that tiny way newborns are. He had thick, dark hair like Jack. His eyes were cloudy at first, but when they opened wider, they looked like they might turn green like mine. I didn't expect love to hit that hard. I expected shame, fear, regret. Instead, I felt this fierce animal thing rise up in my chest. Mine. I held him close and whispered, "Hi, baby. I'm here. I'm right here." For a while, maybe minutes, maybe hours, nothing existed except his breathing and my tears. I counted his fingers. I traced the curve of his ear. I memorized the shape of his mouth like my brain was trying to tattoo him into me. I sang a hymn under my breath. My voice shook, but he quieted like he recognized gentleness. Then the door opened. A nun stepped in, older, calm, with hands that moved like she'd done this 1,000 times. Her name tag said Sister Pauline. She wasn't cruel. That's what makes it worse. She looked at me with something like pity, but also something like practice. She said my fake name softly. "It's time." My arms tightened around my baby. "I want 1 more hour," I whispered. Sister Pauline sighed like she'd heard that exact sentence from every frightened girl who came through those doors. "Sweetheart," she said, voice gentle but firm, "we need you to sign the papers." Papers, like my child was an object. I shook my head, tears spilling fast. I can't do it. Sister Pauline sat on the edge of the chair. You're young, she said carefully. You still have a future. This baby will go to a family who's ready, a mother and father who can provide. I wanted to scream, I'm his mother. I wanted to say, I can learn, I can work, I can do anything. But I had no plan, no money, no support, no one waiting outside the door. Back home, my whole life was built on a lie. If I returned with a baby and no husband, the town wouldn't just judge me, it would eat me alive. I kissed my son's forehead until my lips trembled. I love you, I whispered over and over. I love you. I love you. Then, because my heart was breaking and I didn't know what else to give him, I told him the truth I couldn't tell anyone else. Your dad was good. He loved you first. Sister Pauline held out the clipboard. My signature looked like it belonged to a stranger. And then she lifted my baby from my arms. The moment he left my body panicked. My arms felt empty in a way that wasn't just physical, it was wrong, like the universe had made a mistake. When she carried him out, I made a sound I still hear in my dreams, half sob, half scream. 3 days later, I went home and told my parents I'd visited a sick friend. They believed me, because why wouldn't they? But I wasn't the same. I started waking at night hearing phantom cries. I felt phantom kicks. My body remembered what my mind was trying to bury. And then, one day, our parish priest looked at me with that gentle, serious face and asked, Nora, have you ever considered religious life? And in that moment, the convent didn't feel like a calling. It felt like the only place left to disappear. I entered the convent to hide my past, but years later, a single initial, M, would prove I was never the only one carrying my secret. I entered the convent in September of 1964, 6 months after I gave birth under a false name and signed away the only thing I'd ever loved without conditions. I told my parents I felt called. I said it calmly, like I wasn't shaking inside. My mother cried, happy tears this time. My father stood taller, like my choice restored something respectable to our family story. The parish praised them for raising a daughter so devoted. No one praised me for surviving. And that's what it was, survival. The convent was strict in the way only sacred places can be. We woke before sunrise. We prayed when our bodies wanted sleep. We worked in silence so long you could hear your own thoughts scraping against your ribs. Meals were plain. Beds were hard. Privacy was almost non-existent. For most novices, it felt like a shock. For me, it felt like relief. Because the world outside had mirrors and questions. The world outside had neighbors who stared too long. The world outside had my mother's voice asking, "Are you okay?" with a sharpness that made my stomach flip. Inside these walls, nobody asked why my eyes looked haunted. Nobody asked why my hands trembled when I held a baby in the village. Nobody asked why I flinched when someone said the word, mother. Here, discipline was normal, silence was holy, and pain could be mistaken for devotion. I leaned into that misunderstanding with everything I had. I became the most obedient novice, the quietest, the hardest worker. I stayed longer in prayer. I volunteered for the most exhausting chores. I spoke only when required. I smiled when expected. But at night, when the lights were out and the convent settled into its soft creaks and distant footsteps, I turned into the girl I'd tried to bury. I would lie in bed and see him, my baby, like a flash of warmth in my arms. I'd hear his cry and feel my body respond like it was still my job to soothe him. Sometimes I pressed my palm to my stomach, like he might still be there, like time could rewind if I wished hard enough. I started doing things the convent never asked me to do. I slept on the floor more often than on the mattress. I skipped meals. I wore scratchy cloth under my habit until my skin burned. I told myself it was penance. I told myself I deserved discomfort if my son was out there somewhere without me. It wasn't holiness. It was self-punishment dressed up in prayer. Mother Agnes Hart, our Mother Superior, noticed. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words, but when she spoke, you felt seen in a way that almost hurt. One evening, she called me to her office. The room smelled faintly of old books and candle wax. She waited until I sat. "Nora," she said softly, my birth name which I hadn't heard spoken in weeks. "God does not demand you destroy yourself." My throat tightened. "I'm fine, Mother." She studied me like she could see the truth through fabric and silence. "What are you trying to atone for?" she asked. That question could have ended everything. I could have said it then. I could have confessed the baby, the false name, the adoption papers, the lie I told my parents when I came home. I could have finally told someone the truth and let the burden breathe. But fear had trained me too well. So I gave her a smaller lie. "I struggle with attachment," I said carefully. "Worldly thoughts. Pride." Mother Agnes nodded slowly, not buying it, but not forcing me either. Mercy can look like patience, and she gave me more patience than I deserved. Years passed. I took my vows. I became Sister Eliza Clare, and from the outside, I looked healed. I taught at the convent school. I cared for older sisters. I worked in the kitchen and the garden. I carried myself with the soft steadiness people associate with faith. But inside, the ache never stopped. It just learned to whisper. Every child I taught reminded me of what I'd lost. Every boy with dark hair made my breath catch. When families visited the village, I'd catch myself watching them, counting ages, studying faces, wondering if any of those children carried my blood. I started telling myself ridiculous things, like I'd recognize my son if I saw him. Like love was a magnet that could pull us back together. Then, around the year my son would have turned 21, the whispers became screams. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped speaking. They called it depression. They called it exhaustion. They called it a crisis of vocation. But I knew the real name. It was grief. And it was coming to collect. Mother Agnes begged me to tell her what I'd done. I almost did, until a doctor said one sentence that made me realize my secret had never truly been sealed in the first place. The year my son would have turned 21, something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It snapped the way old fabric tears. Quietly, suddenly, and all at once. It started with appetite, or the absence of it. Food tasted like ash. I'd lift a spoon, stare at it, and feel sick. The sisters thought I was fasting out of devotion. I let them believe it, because devotion sounded better than I can't swallow my own guilt. Then sleep disappeared. I'd lie in bed with my eyes open, listening to the convent settle. Footsteps, distant doors, a cough down the hall, the wind pressing against old windows. And beneath it all, my mind replayed one scene like it was carved into me. Sister Pauline taking my baby from my arms while I begged for one more minute. Every night I heard phantom cries. Every morning I woke feeling like I'd failed him again. Eventually, I stopped getting out of bed. At first I told myself I was just tired, that I'd rise when my body cooperated. But then the sun moved across the window and I didn't care. The day passed, and I didn't care. And that's when I realized I wasn't tired. I was drowning. The sisters found me curled into myself, eyes open, mouth closed. When they asked what was wrong, I couldn't answer. It felt like speaking would split me apart, like the truth was too sharp for my tongue. They took me to a hospital. I hated it instantly. The smell, the harsh lights, the way it pulled me back to 1964 without permission. Doctors asked questions. Any family history? Any trauma? Any thoughts of harming yourself? I stared at the ceiling and said nothing. Mother Agnes came every day. She sat beside me and held my hand, like she was anchoring me to the world. She didn't lecture. She didn't force prayers into my mouth. She just stayed. Steady, patient, human. One afternoon she leaned close and whispered, "Eliza, my child, whatever you're carrying, God can forgive it, but you have to let someone help you." I turned my head toward her. My lips parted. I wanted to say it. I had a baby. I gave him away. I lied to everyone. I ran here and hid behind holiness like it was a shield. The words climbed up my throat. Hot, urgent, ready. Then there was a soft knock, and a woman stepped into the room holding a thin folder. She wore an ID badge that read medical records. She moved carefully, like she was used to rooms where people were already falling apart. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, eyes flicking to the doctor and then back to me. Her voice stayed gentle. "We ran into something while pulling your older history." My heart thudded. She opened the folder and pointed to a line I couldn't see from where I lay. "Some of your documents are under a different name," she said. "It happens sometimes with older paper records, married names, clerical errors, archived files being merged." I barely breathed. "And there's a restriction note attached," she continued, flipping one page. "Sealed pages. It references a Catholic charity facility from the 1960s. If you want details, it would have to go through archives." The room tilted. Sealed pages. From the 1960s. Mother Agnes's gaze sharpened. Why would it be sealed? The records woman hesitated. Not dramatic, just cautious. "Older institutions sometimes restricted sensitive cases," she said. "It doesn't mean anything illegal. It just means certain pages aren't available without special clearance." Sensitive cases. My mouth went dry. Because it meant what I'd spent decades praying wasn't true. This hadn't been just my secret. Someone else had handled my story, filed it, locked it, labeled it. And if a system had ever touched my paperwork, if someone had decided parts of my life needed to stay sealed, then I hadn't been alone in that hospital the way I'd believed. not truly. There had been other hands in the room. Quiet hands. Official hands. Hands that didn't have to threaten me because they could simply close doors and call it order. I couldn't confess after that. Not because I didn't trust Mother Agnes, because I did. But a new fear slid into my bones. What if someone powerful still wanted this buried? What if speaking didn't bring relief, but consequences? I recovered slowly. Months of therapy, medication, the sisters' quiet care. I learned to function again, smile again, teach again. But I wasn't the same. I became softer with broken people, and the convent began receiving girls, teenagers. They arrived shaking the way I once shook, pregnant, abandoned, terrified. Some had nowhere to go. When I looked at them, I didn't see sin. I saw fear wearing a young face. And I made a promise to myself. I could not save my own past, but I could help someone else survive theirs. That work gave me purpose, but it also kept my wound open. Because every time I held a frightened girl's hand, I remembered the day no one held mine. Years later, trying to quiet the ache for good, I hired an investigator to find my son. Just once, just to know he was alive. I didn't realize that search would lead straight back to the sealed trail I'd been warned about, and to a name written like a command. Father K. I became known for working with the girls no one wanted to talk about. That's the truth. In our town, the parish spoke kindly about charity. But when a pregnant teenager showed up on a doorstep, people's kindness often came wrapped in judgment. The girls learned fast. You could be helped, but you'd also be labeled. They arrived in different ways. Some brought by frantic relatives, some dropped off by social workers, some showing up alone with nothing but a backpack and wide, terrified eyes. They were younger than I'd like to admit. 15, 16, 17. Some had bruises on their arms. Some had stories they whispered like confessions because they'd never been allowed to say them out loud. I didn't ask them to be good. I asked them to be safe. I learned how to sit with silence without demanding it be holy. I learned how to say, I believe you, and mean it. I learned how to give them choices, real choices, without pushing them toward shame. Sometimes they kept their babies. Sometimes they chose adoption. Sometimes they chose something else. Whatever they chose, I fought to make sure they weren't alone the way I had been alone. There was one girl, Jasmine, who arrived shaking so badly she couldn't hold a cup of tea. She kept repeating, I'm ruined. Like it was a fact, not a feeling. I sat beside her and said, You're not ruined. You're scared. She stared at me suspicious. You don't know me. And I almost said, I know you better than you think. Instead, I said, I know fear, and fear lies. Over time, that work changed me. It didn't erase my pain, but it gave it direction. My suffering became something I could use like a lantern instead of something that burned me from the inside. Mother Agnes once told me, You have a way with them. They trust you. I nodded, swallowing the truth. They trusted me because I was one of them, just older, wrapped in a habit, with decades of silence layered like armor. But the wound never closed. Every time I saw a newborn, my arms remembered the weight of my son. Every time a girl signed papers, I remembered the clipboard and my trembling signature. Every time someone said, It's for the best, my stomach turned, because that phrase had stolen half my life. As the years passed, I did my best to keep my promise, the one I'd made in the hospital when I kissed my son goodbye. I will love you even if I can't reach you. I never reached out. I never broke the adoption agreement. I never went hunting for him. Until the early 2000s, when age started whispering its own warnings. I began waking up with my heart racing, thinking, what if I die without ever knowing if he's okay? And then another thought, darker. What if he's not okay? And I could have helped. So in 2003, I did something I swore I would never do. I hired a private investigator. I told myself I only wanted one answer. Is he alive? But deep down, I wanted everything. I wanted his face, his voice, his forgiveness, proof that my sacrifice had meant something. The investigator found him quickly, and when I saw the first photograph, his adult face, his eyes, his smile, it felt like my lungs filled for the first time in 40 years. Then the investigator said, "There's something you should know." I braced myself for anything, but I wasn't ready for what he told me next. That sealed records weren't the only reason the trail was hard to follow. Someone had actively made sure certain names never connected. Someone with authority. Someone with a collar. The investigator slid a second page across the table, an old note tied to my son's file. It wasn't from a hospital. It wasn't from an agency. It was stamped with a parish seal, and it referenced only 2 words. Father K. I met the investigator in a cafe 2 towns over, far enough from the convent that no one would recognize my face. He was the kind of man who kept his voice low and his questions practical. No drama, no judgment, just facts. I didn't tell him I was a nun. I didn't even tell him my real name at first. I only told him there had been an adoption in 1964, and I needed to know one thing, whether the child was alive. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Most people say that, but they usually want more." I swallowed and replied, "I can't want more." A week later, he called. I found him. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the receiver. When we met again, he slid a file across the table. Photos, a name, a city, a life I had not been invited to. Evan James Carter, 39 years old, married, 3 kids, high school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. A teacher, like Jack. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. The investigator said, "He seems like a good man." I stared at Evan's photo until my eyes blurred. Dark hair, kind expression, a smile that looked familiar. Not identical to Jack, but close enough to make my chest ache. Then the investigator added, "There's a complication." I whispered, "What?" He lowered his voice. He didn't find out he was adopted until recently. A record leak at the county level. It opened questions. My stomach dropped. He continued, "Also, your trail was harder than it should have been." I forced myself to breathe, because the records were sealed. "Yes," he said, "but not just sealed, directed." He pulled out a single yellowed sheet, thin paper, old type, faint ink. At the bottom, a parish seal. At the top, a line that made my blood run cold. Do not release identifying details. Refer all inquiries to Father K. I stared at it, unable to blink. Father K. I didn't know the full name. The paper didn't include it, just the initial. The kind of secrecy that assumes everyone already knows who you mean. The investigator said, "This isn't standard adoption agency language. This is institutional." My mouth went dry. Why would a parish be involved? He shrugged. In that era, it happened. Churches connected families to agencies, handled family matters, tried to protect reputations. Protect reputations. That phrase felt like a knife. Because I finally understood something I'd never allowed myself to admit. It wasn't only my fear that trapped me. It was a system designed to keep girls quiet and families clean. I asked, "Did he ever search for me?" The investigator hesitated. There's no clear record, but yes, there were inquiries. They hit dead ends. Dead ends. Manufactured dead ends. He tapped the Father K page. This looks like one of those dead ends. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you want to contact him? Every part of me screamed yes, but guilt answered first. How could I disrupt Evan's life? How could I drop this truth into his marriage, his children, his identity? How could I explain that I chose silence for 40 years? I shook my head. No. The investigator studied me like he knew I was lying to myself. Are you sure? No, I whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. But I can't. I took the file back with me anyway, hid it, read it at night like a forbidden prayer. Then one evening, panic swallowed me whole. If the church had stamped that page, if Father K had been part of the trail, what if someone still didn't want this story exposed? I did the stupidest thing I've ever done. I burned the file. I watched Evan's photo curl into black ash, thinking fire could erase the past. It couldn't, because you can't burn a mother's memory, and you can't burn the truth out of your own bones. For years after that, I lived with a new kind of torment, not just not knowing my son, but knowing he existed and choosing not to reach him. Then, in November 2023, the envelope arrived. No stamp, no address, just my name and the initial M. When the young woman finally told me her name, Kayla Carter Reyes, I realized the fire hadn't erased anything. It had only delayed the moment Evan's family came looking for me. Kayla Carter Reyes didn't come to the convent like someone looking for prayer. She came like someone looking for answers. After the initial shock of her last name, I offered her tea in the small visitor room near the entrance. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. Kayla wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. She watched me with eyes that looked too steady for someone her age. My grandmother told me to find you, she said again. She said you'd be scared and you'd try to shut the door. She told me not to let you. Your grandmother? My voice shook. Who was she? Kayla hesitated, then reached into her tote and pulled out a small notebook. Worn, soft at the corners, the kind of thing someone keeps close. Her name was Maris Carter, Kayla said. She raised my dad. She was stubborn, protective, the kind of woman who kept secrets like they were family heirlooms. Maris. M. My hands trembled. How did she know about me? Kayla opened the notebook. Inside were notes, dates, names written in careful handwriting, like someone had been piecing a puzzle together for years. She found an old photo, Kayla said, tapping the notebook. And she found a letter. Not yours, not mine, someone else's. She never told my dad the full story while she was alive, but she left everything for me. Why you? I whispered. Kayla's mouth tightened. Because my dad was scared, and she knew I'd go looking anyway. She slid the photograph across the table, the same one from the envelope. The hospital bed. 2 girls, 1 baby. One of those girls was me. Kayla said quietly, My grandma said the woman holding the baby wasn't you. She was a nurse trainee, and she said that trainee kept the picture because she felt sorry for you. My stomach turned. Then Kayla added, and because someone told her to keep her mouth shut. My throat tightened. Someone who? Kayla flipped a page in the notebook and pointed to 2 words written in bold. Father K. I stared at the letters like they were a curse. Kayla said, My grandma worked at the parish office when she was younger. Just part-time. Filing, phones, stuff like that. She said there was a priest who handled sensitive matters. Girls who got sent away. Papers that got sealed. Stories that got rewritten. I whispered, I never knew. Kayla looked at me gently. You weren't supposed to know. I felt sick. All those years I punished myself, thinking I was the only villain in my story, and there had been other hands shaping the outcome. Kayla swallowed hard. There's more. I braced myself. She said, My dad knows he's adopted. My heart lurched. He does? Kayla nodded. He found out recently. A DNA match. Records. Questions he couldn't ignore. My mouth went dry. And he knows about me? Kayla's eyes softened. Not everything. Not yet. But he knows there's a birth mother. He knows he was loved. My chest ached. Kayla leaned forward. Sister Eliza, he wants answers. He doesn't want to hate you. He wants to understand. I stared at my hands, old hands, hands that held prayer beads and school books and trembling girls, hands that once held a newborn for 3 hours and then let go. What is his name? I asked, though I already knew. Kayla said, Evan. Evan Carter. Hearing it out loud felt like opening a door I'd kept locked for decades. Then Kayla reached into her bag again and pulled out another envelope. Older, yellowed, tied with ribbon like it mattered. This, she said, is why my grandma wanted you found. I whispered, Who is it from? Kayla's voice dropped. From Jack Delaney. My heart stopped, because Jack Delaney was the name I'd buried under grief and prayer, the name I thought belonged to a dead man. I stared at the envelope, hands shaking, and understood in a single horrifying second. Either Kayla was mistaken, or the entire foundation of my life had been built on a lie. I opened Jack's letter with trembling fingers, and the first line made my blood run cold. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I finally found a way to reach you. I didn't open Jack's letter right away. I know how that sounds. A woman waits 60 years, then hesitates at the edge of the truth. But that envelope felt heavier than paper. It felt like time itself. Kayla sat across from me, quiet, letting me breathe. She didn't push. She didn't fill the silence. She simply waited, like someone who understood that some truths arrive like storms. You don't rush into them. You brace. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside were 2 pages, folded carefully. The handwriting was older, shakier than the Jack I remembered, but still unmistakably his. Neat, deliberate, like he wanted every word to land clean. The first line punched the air out of my chest. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I finally found a way to reach you. My vision blurred. I read on, lips moving silently. Jack wrote that he didn't die in Vietnam. He wrote that he was captured, that he spent years in places he couldn't describe in detail, years that changed him in ways no one back home could understand. He wrote that when he finally returned, he went to my parents' house with a hope so fragile it felt like glass. And he found nothing. No Nora, no fiancé, no explanation. Only closed faces and polite lies. He wrote, "They told me you left, that you needed peace, that asking questions would only cause pain." My stomach twisted. Jack wrote that he spent years looking anyway, hiring people, following rumors, asking in ways that didn't get him thrown out of offices. He wrote that the town treated him like a problem, like his grief was inconvenient. Then came the line that made my hands go numb. I learned about our baby. I made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Jack said he tracked the hospital, tracked the agency, tracked the adoption trail until it hit a wall stamped with a parish seal. He didn't write Father K directly, but he wrote this. There was a priest. He didn't threaten me. He didn't have to. He spoke calmly about God's will and clean starts, and how some things should stay buried for the good of everyone. Clean starts, buried, for the good of everyone. Jack wrote, he said you had chosen a life of faith and that I had no right to disrupt it. He said our son deserved stability and that my presence would only confuse him. My throat tightened with fury and grief. Jack wrote he didn't believe them at first. Then he found proof. Small pieces, quiet confirmations. Enough to understand that someone had handled the story for us without our consent. He wrote that when he finally learned I'd taken vows, he stopped searching publicly. Not because he stopped caring, because he didn't want to rip my life apart if I'd chosen it freely. Instead, he did something that broke me all over again. He watched from a distance. He wrote, I saw him once, just once, from across a room. He looked like you, Nora. He looked like me. I didn't speak. I didn't step closer. I only wanted to know he was real. My hands shook so badly I had to set the pages down. Jack had seen Evan. Jack had been near him, and I never knew. The last part of Jack's letter softened. He wrote, I don't blame you. I know what the world was like back then. I know what it did to girls. I know what it did to families. If you ran because you were scared, and you were alone. Then he wrote the line that shattered me in a way prayer never could. I never stopped loving you. I pressed the paper to my chest like it could stop my heart from breaking. Kayla whispered, he died last year. I closed my eyes. I had mourned Jack twice. Once when I believed he was dead, and again when I learned he was alive. And I had missed him anyway. Kayla touched my hand gently. My grandma said he wanted you to meet my dad. He wanted Evan to know he was loved by both of you. I swallowed hard. Does Evan know about Jack? Kayla nodded. He knows now. My chest tightened. And he still wants to meet me? Kayla's voice was steady, more than anything. I stared at the convent wall, the same stone that had held my secrets for decades. It suddenly looked less like safety and more like a cage. I whispered, "Okay." Kayla exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "Okay," I repeated louder this time. "I'll meet him." And as soon as I said it, a new fear rose up, cold and sharp. If Father K had controlled the story once, what else had he controlled? What else had been hidden in sealed files? What else was waiting, quiet and patient, to surface? 2 days later, I stepped into a park in Ohio and saw Evan walking toward me. And before he even spoke, I recognized Jack in his face and realized this reunion would change everything. Kayla drove me to Ohio in the early morning. The sky was pale, the roads wet from overnight rain. I wore simple clothes, no habit, no veil. I couldn't explain it fully, but I wanted Evan to meet me, not the symbol people imagined when they heard the word nun. We arrived at a quiet park on a Sunday afternoon. Bare trees, cold air, a few families walking dogs, kids shrieking near a playground like joy had never been complicated. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Kayla said softly, "He's nervous too." I tried to breathe like Mother Agnes taught me, slow in, slow out. But my heart had its own rhythm now, fast, frantic, terrified. Then I saw him, Evan. He was taller than I expected, broad shoulders, a calm walk, but you could tell his body was tense, like he was carrying something heavy inside his ribs. And his face. It wasn't Jack's face exactly, but it was close enough to hurt. The same eyes, the same gentle expression, like kindness was his default. The same shape of mouth that looked like it would soften when he smiled. My throat tightened. Evan stopped a few feet away. Kayla stepped back slightly, giving us space like she understood this wasn't her moment, it was ours. For a second, Evan just stared at me. His eyes were wet. His jaw clenched like he was holding himself together with sheer will. Then he said, "Hi." It was the simplest word, and it shattered me. I managed, "Hi." He swallowed. I didn't know what you'd look like." I forced a shaky smile. Neither did I. We stood there awkwardly, like strangers who shared the same blood and the same grief, but didn't yet know what to do with it. Then Evan stepped closer and said, very quietly, "Are you Nora?" Hearing my birth name out loud felt like being touched on a bruise. "Yes," I whispered. "I was." Evan's face tightened. "I don't hate you," he said quickly, as if he'd rehearsed it. "I don't want you to be afraid of me." My eyes filled. "I am afraid," I admitted, "but not of you. I'm afraid of what I took from you." Evan's voice cracked. "You didn't take my life. I had a good one. I always felt like there was a missing chapter." His eyes searched mine, and now I'm standing in front of it. Something in me broke open. I stepped forward and Evan opened his arms, hesitant at first, like he wasn't sure I'd accept. Then I hugged him, and he hugged me back, firm and warm, like he'd been waiting years without realizing it. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Evan held me and whispered, "I know." We sat on a bench and talked for hours. I told him about Jack, about the ring, about the missing in action letter, about the pregnancy and the panic and the hospital in the papers. Evan didn't interrupt. He listened like a man who wanted the truth more than comfort. When I finished, he stared at the ground for a long time. Then he said, "My grandma, Maris, used to tell me something." I blinked. "What?" He swallowed. She'd say, "Some women don't abandon their children. They get boxed out." My breath caught. Evan looked at me. I didn't understand it as a kid, but I do now. Tears slid down his cheek, and he wiped them like he was embarrassed. Then he surprised me. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. 3 kids lined up on a couch, grinning. "My kids," he said softly. "They want to meet you." My chest tightened. They know? Evan nodded. Kayla told them carefully. They asked 100 questions. Mostly they want to know if you're okay. I let out a broken laugh through tears. "That's very kind." Evan smiled then, and for a second I saw Jack so clearly it felt like he was standing beside us. But as the sun lowered and the day softened, Kayla approached again. She held a folder, thin, official-looking. "There's one more thing," she said. I stared at the folder. "What is it?" I whispered. Kayla's voice turned quiet. A copy of the parish note, the one stamped with the seal, the one that says, "Refer all inquiries to Father K." My stomach dropped. Because if that paper existed, then so did more. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't just a reunion. It was an unsealing. That night, Kayla opened the folder and pointed to a date that made my blood run cold. Because Father K's note was written before Jack was declared missing, which meant someone started controlling our story long before I ever hid. Kayla spread the papers across the hotel table like she was laying out evidence in a case. A parish seal, a typed note, dates, a few lines that looked harmless if you didn't know what they cost. She tapped one page and said, "Look at this." I leaned in and felt my stomach drop. The date on Father K's note was earlier than it should have been, written before Jack was officially declared missing, before the government letter arrived, before I even knew I was pregnant. I stared at it, confused. That doesn't make sense. Kayla's voice was calm, but her eyes were intense. It makes sense if someone was already managing the narrative, if the parish expected scandal, if they wanted control before anything got messy. I felt cold, because it suggested something terrifying. I wasn't only reacting to tragedy. I might have been guided into silence by people who understood exactly how shame could be used like a leash. Evan sat quietly, jaw tight. "So what are we saying?" he asked. "That a priest decided my life for everyone?" Kayla chose her words carefully. "We're saying there's proof that someone in the parish office directed inquiries away. We're saying there's evidence certain records were restricted beyond normal adoption practice. And we're saying Grandma Maris believed it wasn't just bureaucracy. She believed it was intentional." Intentional. I thought about my parents' panic, the way my mother valued reputation like it was oxygen. I thought about the parish's power in our town. I thought about how young girls were treated when they messed up. And I felt a slow, furious grief rise in my chest. All those years I punished myself as if I alone had ruined everything. and yet there had been a system ready to bury me the moment I became inconvenient. Evan stared at the seal. Do we know who Father K was? Kayla shook her head. Not fully. The initial shows up in old parish directories, but names change, titles change. My grandma never said his full name out loud. She was scared. She just said, "He has keys." Keys. I knew that kind of man. The kind who doesn't shout, doesn't threaten. The kind who smiles and speaks about what's best, while quietly closing doors you didn't know existed. Evan's voice cracked. I don't even know if I should be angry or grateful. I reached across the table and held his hand. You can be both, I said softly. Life allows that. It doesn't ask permission. That night, after Kayla went to sleep, Evan and I sat by the window while the city lights blurred in the distance. I kept thinking you didn't want me, Evan admitted. Even as a kid, like there was a part of me that believed I must have been easy to leave. My heart squeezed. No, I whispered. You were impossible to leave. He looked at me, eyes shining. Then why? And there it was, the question that lives at the center of every sealed story. I answered the only honest way I could. Because I was 19. Because I was alone. Because the world back then made girls disappear to keep other people comfortable. Evan nodded slowly, absorbing it like truth hurts, but also heals. The next morning, I called Mother Agnes from the convent phone line. My voice shook. Mother, I said, I need to tell you something. All of it. She didn't ask questions. She only said, Come home. We'll talk. When I returned, I sat in her office, the same room with old books and candle wax, and spoke the truth I'd held hostage for decades. Jack, the baby, the hospital, the lie, the shame, the years of self-punishment, the file, the seal, Father K. When I finished, Mother Agnes held my hands, tears in her eyes. My child, she whispered, God forgave you a long time ago. The harder mercy is the one you must give yourself. Over the next years I didn't think I deserved, Evan and his children visited. Kayla brought photos and stories. The convent courtyard filled with laughter I once believed I wasn't allowed to have. And the girls I'd helped over my lifetime, some of them wrote me letters that said, You saved me, and you made me feel human again. I recorded this confession in 2023 because I don't want silence to win. If you are carrying shame that was handed to you by fear, by culture, by other people's comfort, hear me. Your story is not dirty. Your truth is not dangerous. And love does not disappear just because someone tried to lock it away. Because if one parish seal could bury my life for 60 years, how many other girls were sent away? How many other babies were reassigned? And how many other letters are still waiting, unstamped, unaddressed, to find the person they were meant to save? If this story hit you in the heart, you're not alone. Here on Voices of Extraordinary Grandmas, we share true-to-life stories about the strength, love, and secrets older women carried in silence. Now I want to ask you something. Do you think Sister Eliza was protected or controlled? Drop your answer in the comments. Protected or controlled? I read them all. If you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story is even darker, and it starts with a convent record stamped, Do Not Release. Privacy note. Names, locations, and identifying details may be changed or combined to protect anonymity. Until next time, remember, Grandma is still here. Her story isn't finished.